Hey guys, this is Mecha talking animation again. Today we're going to be poking at some fun digital tools and the advantages that said tools can give you when wanting to animate good and efficiently. Main thing we're going to be looking at specifically is the idea of multiple layers, but one character. So again, I use Toon Boom Harmony personally and their PEG system with some other advanced animation tools, but you can do a lot of the same tricks in most programs. Adobe Animate, After Effects, Krita. How you do it may change, but I want to talk about this in a way that can be applied to just about any program, so anyone can use these. A lot of times people will make reusable character rigs using basically the same techniques we're about to go over, which is super valid and very smart, especially for longer projects. But when you make a rig, it's normally kind of basic in a few ways. You can only plan ahead for so much, and if you do anything that wasn't planned for it originally, you can kind of break the rig and you end up doing more work anyway. So sometimes you still want to go into it with the plan of traditional frame by frame to get that flexibility and freedom with it. And also, I mean, let's face it, frame by frame animation looks amazing. You're able to play with more perspective and depth, dimensionality, in ways that rigs don't cooperate with. Not to say that, don't be a rig animator, lots of jobs for it, and it works. It really does. So to sum up what we're going to be going over here is basically making a soft rig for the scene. Not going through it so much and making sure that it can blink, talk, and do all the things that a full rig does, because that takes a lot of time up front, but animating using a lot of those rigging techniques, basically making a separate frame by frame animation on the arm that can be rigged to the animation on the body, and it's meant to work in one specific animation, which means that you can do more and push it more than if you just took your standard puppet. This will let you have consistency. So if your head doesn't have to move, don't just keep redrawing it when you don't have to, let it just be there, while your arm can be doing all the crazy things it needs to do as an arm in that animation. So when animating with these techniques and doing it in this specific way, I personally found that you do your first sketch pass on it. So of course, if you have your animatic, use your animatic. You don't necessarily do this in the same way on that. Personally, when I'm storyboarding, I'll leave little notes on how I want to go about animating it in the future, or how we'll give it the best impact, the best energy, the best motion. So I'll be like, hey, different layer for the arms, make sure that the hair can be on its own layer for maximum follow through, etc. But once I get into real animation, my sketches kind of get dumbed down from their storyboard a little bit, just to get focus on that motion more than the end result for a little bit. So what I will do is find the core motion. In the case of this scene with Arrow fighting on the rooftop, her legs to her head are all following one thing. Those, if the torso is being redrawn, then the head's probably getting redrawn and the legs are probably getting redrawn. There's no need for those to move separately for the effect that I was looking for. So, which really works, because that means that you have the full spine line, your full line of action to play with. So use your first thumbnails and storyboards as your guide there, and get that worked out. Then you can go over with your arm sketches or whatever is on top of that. In this scene specifically, we wanted to really let the arms have that motion. There's a point where the head's not doing a whole lot compared to other parts of her. The arms are moving all over the place. She's getting herself into position, the torso, legs, and body. She sees her target and then smacks with the pommel of her knife or her flute. We wanted to let the arms continue to have that follow through after, and really feel lively. Whereas if we're drawing it just frame by frame, the whole thing is one drawing, then that means doing all the body over and over again. There might be some jitter where it's not necessary, and it'll take longer. But letting the arms be their own thing, one, we don't even have to redraw the arms as much as before. We can just get it to where it needs to be, and then using the peg tools, have that give some of that little secondary motion or follow-through action. Of course, though, you want to be careful when moving the pieces around, because you don't want the arm to follow through so much that it leaves the rest of the body. So there's a little bit of restraint you have to practice. But again, it's digital. You can always undo, and if you're moving a peg or an empty layer or a null object that your arm is parented to, if the motion gets too crazy, you can just delete the motion and start over without losing any information that was kept on the arm. And you can do the same thing with her little wing skirt. We knew that we wanted the wings to not feel rigid on the body. If the body moved forward, then the wings are going to follow through, but we want them to move a little bit after. And again, there's no need to redraw the whole body if it's not supposed to move. And letting the body stay still and let other parts move more kind of adds to the chaoticness of life, to the constant motion of life. You can tell Arrow is no longer consciously moving. However, she cannot stop the energy that she has created. I want to go on a little bit of a tangent here, because this kind of brings up something that I was taught at by one of my animation professors at school. I can't remember what movie that she had referenced, but when you're animating, especially if you're going to be doing something like this, you want to think about what is the dominant part of the body. What is making the decisions, or what is the most thought about part of this whole shebang. On human beings and most animals, the dominant part is our head, our eyes, our brain. We see something and we react. So you want to kind of think about that. Our head is what is making decisions. If we are grabbing at a baseball, you probably need to be looking at that baseball, otherwise it feels uncanny and weird. The torso is kind of our engine. It is putting forth the initial energy. This kind of creates almost a step-by-step nature of what moves first for each action. The head will first turn and see it, the torso will turn and direct the energy, and then the limbs will come up and grab it. And this doesn't necessarily hold true for every single action. Even though we think with our heads and everything, you can break it down even further, or use that to show how much someone trusts their other senses. So if you're animating perhaps a blind old monk who obviously cannot see, he has no reason to turn his or her head and to look at whoever is approaching or what their action is. They would let that stick lead them. And you would want to animate and draw it in a way so that the stick always enters the room first. Or when they walk, their feet are like Toph from Avatar: Last Airbender. She would be stepping and feeling. Her feet are kind of making those decisions more than her head or her brain when we traditionally think about it. Arrow, as a dancer, she'll lead with her hips, with her motion, her rhythm, which is different compared to how a boxer, they feel things out with their jabs. That's how they interact with the world. That's something that you can use to kind of dictate what layer you're going to find out first. For Arrow, again, makes sense for her torso to kind of be figuring it all out. Her arms aren't strong. She's not putting the arm forth to protect herself. She's getting her rhythm going, following through. Whereas someone else, feeling it out, jabs, punches, doing this or that. If they're really sloppy, they throw their head forward because they really want, they think they need to get that line of sight. So this will change per character, but using a lot of the same concepts and principles. Now, like I alluded to earlier with this whole frame by frame thing, Going to use a lot of the same concepts as rigging. So we're going to get into a little bit of the technical nature, a little bit of how Toon Boom does it specifically, but again, you should be able to take these principles and move them on. Classic thing I've said before, you do your frame by frame animation first, and then you're going to parent that whole animation to another layer. Depending on what program, an empty layer, a null object in Toon Boom, they're called pegs. Parent that to a peg so that when you move it, you're not interfering with your original drawing. You want to keep as many things safe and editable later, independent of other things. And then you would just go ahead and really, again, you're rigging. If you're animating your hand separately from the arm, the hand will get connected to the arm. The arm gets connected to the body. Head connected to this, ears connected there, so on and so forth. And make sure that once, your arm is connected to your body, you want to have another layer that parents all of those together, because you want to be able to, again, move things independently, unconcerned of other assets. Sometimes maybe you don't even connect the arm to the body because you want to be able to move the body a little bit without it. So you would parent both the body and the arms to another master peg so that you can move them both with one motion, or you can move one individually to the other. And then after that, you would animate. So let's say you're animating the shot of Arrow flying towards the temple here. I didn't draw her flying forwards. I drew her one body. I went ahead and did some duplicate drawings to make some of her clothes flap because I didn't want to deal with cloth overlapping with everything. It's like, okay, let's just make this one layer. There's too much overlap to really worry about it. The wings, though, we knew that they're going to be on top of everything. There's nothing that's going to go over top of the wings on her body. So I made another animation loop of them. We then parented those layers to a master and moved that across the scene to create that look of her flying towards the temple. And we actually did this in multiple pegs for one motion. We did a peg for her moving in the depth axis, moving away from the camera. We did another peg to move her across the camera. And then, because if you look at how a bird will fly sometimes, they're not really just shooting across the sky. They have a little bit of a fall and bounce up, because when they flap their wings, they go up, and then they fall down a little bit again, flap their wings. They'll get into their little glides, but I wanted to make the scene feel more alive. Because when you're animating and you're using tricks like this to not animate everything, you need to add more life where you can. So we could have had Arrow just glide and zoom towards the temple. However, I wanted a slower, more contemplative shot. So I thought, well, if she's going to be moving that slowly, that means that she has to keep energizing herself back up. So there's another peg that literally just controls her bouncing up and down. And again, this adds a little bit more life to it. And now you can turn each of them off and edit them indivisibly. Indivisibly? That's sure, we'll go with that word. This lets her, if we wanted to, we could take that out and let her be more smooth, let her feel more in control maybe. But also, I can edit the intensity of her bounce without interrupting her trajectory. Because once you add that keyframe, depending on what you're using, After Effects is great because each layer has its transform, its scale, its opacity. You can edit those all independently without making keyframes for other things. But in this program, you have to, the one peg holds all the information. So if you were to try to do squash and stretch and the motion on one peg, that one keyframe holds both of those sets of information. So to move the squash and stretch, you're also moving the transformation. The workaround, 2 pegs. Makes life much easier. Take my word for it. Learn from my mistakes, please. Using these separate layers on one character can help direct the eye to the core of an action. and let you do more where it counts. Half of animation, especially on bigger projects, is all about this scene is not as important as this scene. How can we make this go the fastest so we can spend more time on this? And that principle is basically being carried forward. The head is staying still. The head is not the cool part of this animation. The arm is the cool part of this animation. I want to be able to put more time into drawing this and making this cool and letting that stay solid. Because also motion is relative. If one part of the scene is staying very still, it makes that other part look all the more animated. And I use the same concept in this shot where we made Arrow play her little flute. Her whole body didn't need to move, her head didn't need to move, but her mouth needed to move. And I wanted to let her have that jaw motion to really look like she was breathing in, and the arm needed to come up and do all of this. So it made sense to just draw her top half, have that stay still, and animate the bottom half, and just slide the layers into each other. You can really explore a lot of ideas and jump into a world where you can do so much using these tools, as long as you are using them ambitiously. As long as you don't become, because sometimes people say, oh, it's rigged, they're just using those modern digital cheats, and sometimes that's true. It kind of pulls the life out of it. I would love to see Rick and Morty with even more frame by frame animation, because when they do it, it does look so much fun. So as long as you're not trying to just hit a status quo beat and you're using it to push the medium, it will always be great, and you can add more life into letting the arms bounce independently of the body, or even just making something jiggle. So I hope that you all enjoyed this, and please, show us some of your multi-layered character animation on Instagram, or post in the comments below. Would love to see it. And until next time, stay safe, stay weird, and stay animated.